Hey everybody, welcome back to an all-new episode of SERIALously. Hey everybody, welcome back to an all-new episode of the true crime podcast SERIALously. It's me, Elise, and today is our headline highlights edition, but you're probably noticing that we usually release headline highlights on Thursdays. That's where we go through all the breaking true crime updates, any brand new cases, things like that. But we're releasing it early this week, and the reason why is because there was a huge breaking news update last night in the Diddy case. I'm sure many of you have seen it, and so this morning, he was actually in court in New York, and I got my hands on the indictment, and I don't know, I just was kind of like, you know what, instead of the regular headline highlights this week, let's dive into this whole Diddy mess and go through all the documents, go through all the charges, everything, and then we'll release it early because it's happening right now. So this week's episode is going to be released a little early, and that's why you're listening to it now. So as I mentioned, last night, Diddy was arrested, and then this morning he was inside the New York courtroom. Once he was inside the courtroom and overnight, we were able to get a glimpse into what exactly those charges have been against him, what the allegations are. We also now have our hands on the unsealed federal indictment. And guys, this gets so crazy, especially when you read through everything and not just go through, the top headlines, because mainstream media is very censored in a lot of what they say. I don't know that they are sharing all of these details, and I understand why, but we're not censored over here, so we are going to break it all down. We're going to go through the whole indictment. I'm going to read all of it to you, the whole 14-page indictment. We're going to go through what went down in the courtroom, what his defense attorney is now saying in response to all of this, and I'm just going to break it all down for you. So, as I mentioned, music mogul Sean Diddy Combs was arrested yesterday at the Park Hyatt Hotel on West 57th Street in New York City. Prosecutors allege that he created and ran a, quote, criminal enterprise through his business empire, and that it engaged in crimes including sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice. I mean, a lot of heavy allegations. Now, in a federal indictment that was unsealed today, Diddy was charged with racketeering, sex trafficking, and transportation to engage in prostitution. He has also recently, as I'm sure so many of you know, he has faced this wave of lawsuits, one as recent as just last week, where they accused him of sexual assault and also misconduct that apparently happened in the past year. But we also saw that horrific viral video of him abusing his then girlfriend, Cassie. They were in the hotel room. She's trying to flee. She's trying to escape. He catches her and literally drags her by the hair back to the hotel room and is like throwing these glass vases at her. It is such a triggering video, so if you haven't seen it, please Google search it with caution. But he has been under scrutiny now for the better part of the year, right? And I'll be honest, I was hopeful that if all of these allegations proved to be true, which it appeared to me they would be, especially after seeing that Cassie video, I was hopeful that he would be held accountable. But I'm kind of surprised that he actually was arrested and charged. I don't know. I feel like he has a lot of pull. He has a lot of people in high places, and I wasn't sure that we would see this. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see what comes with this. Not to mention, of course, all of the allegations that he was involved in Tupac's murder, in other murders. It goes so much higher and deeper than I think we even know. So like I said, a federal indictment was unsealed against him, and they charged him with those 3 felony counts. Those are racketeering, sex trafficking, and transportation to engage in prostitution. So this morning he entered that New York City courtroom so that he could hear the charges for himself, and his defense attorney was, of course, with him. The federal prosecutors are accusing Diddy of forcing victims into these sex acts that he allegedly called, quote, freak-offs. Freak-offs. I know that's hard to understand. I feel like I should spell it, but you get what I'm saying. Freak-offs. So apparently these acts are these sex acts, which he would record for his viewing pleasure. The indictment against him also alleges that he used his vast resources and business associates to, quote, lure female victims into his orbit. And they also say that it was, quote, under the pretense of a romantic relationship. So he would bring these young girls in, pretend to be romantic with them, pretend to be interested in them, but then he would lure them into his disgusting orbit of all of the sex crimes, the abuse, the control, everything. It also goes on to describe these sex performances, which are known as freak-offs, where they say that he allegedly organized the transportation of commercial sex workers across state lines and also internationally, all for these parties. These events, quote, occurred regularly. Sometimes they lasted multiple days, and often they involved multiple commercial sex workers, end quote. Apparently, controlled substances were also a regular part of the performances, according to this indictment, and they were provided in part, quote, to keep victims obedient and compliant. The complaint says that he kept these videos of these people having sex at the gatherings in these freak-offs, also that he could have them as blackmail, as leverage. Prosecutors then offer details of the sorts of supplies that they say that he required for these performances. Now, the supplies, among a lot of other items, included IV fluids, lubricants, and lighting. Like stage-type lighting. Not full stage lighting, but you get what I mean, especially since he was videoing it. So during these parties, he's alleged to have, quote, subjected victims to physical, emotional, and verbal abuse. It claims that victims of his abuse were threatened with a loss of income or even livelihood if they resisted participating in the parties. It also goes on to allege that he, quote, used force to, quote, cause victims to engage in extended sex acts with male commercial sex workers, which he arranged, directed, and masturbated to during the sex acts as they were taking place, and that he often electronically recorded them. The charges against him also allege that he, quote, threatened and coerced women and others around him to fulfill his sexual desires. And federal prosecutors say that this went on for years. They say he created a criminal enterprise whose members and associates all engaged in various crimes such as sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and also obstruction of justice. Now, following his arrest, his attorney, Mark, arrived at the Manhattan federal courthouse, and he briefly spoke out to a very large media gathering that was outside. He says, he came to New York to basically engage the court system and start the case. And it will start today, and he's going to plead not guilty. He said he's going to fight this with all of his energy, all of his might, and the full confidence of his lawyers. Now, that is just the starting point, guys, because I want to read to you this 14-page indictment where it outlines everything. Okay, so we have the federal indictment, and there's might be certain things as we go where I need to redact. I don't think so, but just in case there are names listed, I will redact them for the victims and survivors protection. But this was the once sealed indictment. He was indicted by a grand jury. This is a federal indictment, and it is now unsealed. So for count 1, which is racketeering conspiracy, it says, for decades, Sean Combs, a.k.a. Puff Daddy, a.k.a. P. Diddy, a.k.a. Diddy, a.k.a. PD, a.k.a. Love, guy had a lot of names, it says that he abused, threatened, and coerced women and others around him to fulfill his sexual desires, to also protect his reputation and conceal his conduct. To do so, he relied on the employees, resources, and influence of the multifaceted business empire that he led and controlled, thus creating a criminal enterprise whose members and associates engaged in and attempted to engage in, among other crimes, sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice. Sean Combs operated his business headquartered at various times in Manhattan and Los Angeles under a variety of United States-based corporate entities, including Bad Boys Entertainment, Combs Enterprises, and Combs Global, which is collectively the Combs business. Corporate entities in the Combs business included, among other things, record labels, a recording studio, an apparel line, an alcoholic spirits business, a marketing agency, and a television network and media company. At all times relevant to this indictment, Sean Combs engaged in a persistent and persuasive pattern of abuse toward women and other individuals. This abuse was at times verbal, emotional, physical, and sexual. As part of his pattern of abuse, Combs manipulated women to participate in highly orchestrated performances of sexual activity with male commercial sex workers. At times, Combs and others acting at his direction made arrangements for women and commercial sex workers to fly to Combs' location. Combs ensured participation from the women by, among other things, obtaining and distributing narcotics to them, controlling their careers, leveraging his financial support and threatening to cut off the same, and also using intimidation and violence. Physical abuse by Sean Combs was recurrent and widely known. On numerous occasions from at least in or about 2009 and continuing for years, Combs assaulted women by, among other things, striking, punching, dragging, throwing objects at, and kicking them. These assaults were at times witnessed by others and included one instance at a Los Angeles hotel in or about March 2016. This was captured on video and later publicly reported, where Combs kicked, dragged, and threw a vase at a woman as she was attempting to leave. That's that Cassie video. When a member of the hotel security staff intervened, Combs attempted to bribe the staff members to ensure silence. Combs' violence was also not limited to these women. It extended to his employees, witnesses to his abuse, and others. Sean Combs used the Combs business, including certain employees, to carry out, facilitate, and cover up his abuse and commercial sex. Those employees, including security staff, household staff, personal assistants, and high-ranking supervisors and other close associates, acted as Combs' inner circle, and their conduct was facilitated and assisted by Combs' control of the Combs business. Then it goes into the Combs enterprise, and it says, from at least in or about 2008 through on or about the date of this filing of this indictment, Sean Combs and others known and unknown were members and associates of a criminal organization known as the Combs Enterprise, or the Enterprise. Members and associates of the Combs Enterprise engaged in and attempted to engage in, among other activities, sex trafficking, forced labor, interstate transportation for purposes of prostitution, coercion, and incitement to engage in prostitution, narcotic offenses, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice. The Combs Enterprise, including its leadership, its members, and its associates, constituted an enterprise as defined by Title 18 of the United States Code Section 19614. That is a group of individuals associated in fact, although not a legal entity. The enterprise consisted of Sean Combs, entities within the Combs business, including but not limited to Bad Boy Entertainment, Combs Enterprises, and Combs Global, individuals employed by him and associated with the Combs business, and others known and unknown. The Combs Enterprise constituted an ongoing organization whose members functioned as a continuing unit for a common purpose of achieving the objective of the Combs Enterprise. The Combs Enterprise was engaged in, and its activities affected, interstate and foreign commerce. The Combs Enterprise operated in the Southern District of New York and elsewhere. At all times relevant to this indictment, Sean Combs was the leader of the Combs Enterprise. Sean Combs and others known and unknown participated in unlawful and other activities related to the conduct of the Combs Enterprise's affairs. These individuals included certain Combs business employees, such as members of Combs security staff, household staff, personal assistants, and high-ranking supervisors, as well as other close associates of Combs. It then goes on to the purposes of the Combs Enterprise, and it says, the purposes of the Combs Enterprise includes the following: operating a global business in the media, entertainment, and lifestyle industry, including, among other things, record labels, a recording studio, an apparel line, an alcoholic spirits business, a marketing agency, and a television network and media company. Preserving, protecting, promoting, and enhancing the power, the reputation, and the brand of Sean Combs as a musician, an entrepreneur, and a figure in the entertainment industry. Enriching members and associates of the enterprise, including its leader Combs, and in particular, those who demonstrated loyalty to Combs and willingness to conceal his crimes. Preserving, protecting, promoting, and enhancing the power of the Combs Enterprise, including the power of its leader Combs through violence, use of firearms, threats of violence, coercion, and verbal, emotional, physical, and sexual abuse. Also fulfilling the personal desires of Combs, particularly those related to Combs' sexual gratification, including through the exploitation of women and the use of commercial sex workers. Next, enabling Combs and other members and associates of the Combs enterprise to engage in unlawful acts of violence, including sexual violence, sex trafficking, forced labor, interstate transportation for purposes of prostitution, coercion and incitement to engage in prostitution, narcotics distribution, and other crimes, and also concealing the commission of such acts. Next, securing absolute loyalty from members of the Combs enterprise, including through acts of violence and threats. And then lastly, protecting the Combs enterprise and its members and associates, including Combs, from detection and prosecution by law enforcement authorities. This through acts of intimidation, manipulation, bribery, and threats of retaliation against individuals who witnessed the crimes that were committed by members and associates of the enterprise. It then goes into the means and methods of the enterprise. It says, among the means and methods by which Sean Combs and other members and associates of the Combs enterprise conducted and participated in the conduct of the affairs of the Combs enterprise included the following. 1. Combs and other members and associates of Combs enterprise wielded the power and prestige of Combs' role at the Combs business to intimidate, threaten, and lure female victims into Combs' orbit, often under the pretense of a romantic relationship. Combs then used force, threats of force, and coercion, all to cause victims to engage in extended sex acts with male commercial sex workers, which Combs referred to as, among other things, freak-offs. Freak-offs were elaborate, and they were produced sex performances that Combs arranged, directed, masturbated during, and often electronically recorded. In arranging these freak-offs, Combs, with the assistance of members and associates of the Combs enterprise, transported and caused to be transported commercial sex workers across state lines and internationally. Freak-offs occurred regularly, sometimes lasted multiple days, and involved multiple commercial sex workers. During freak-offs, Combs distributed a variety of controlled substances to the victims, in part to keep the victims obedient and compliant. Sometimes, unbeknownst to the victims, Combs kept the videos he filmed of victims engaging in sex acts with these commercial sex workers. After freak-offs, Combs and the victims typically received IV fluids to recover from the physical exertion and the drug use. Next, members and associates of the Combs enterprise, including high-ranking supervisors, security staff, household staff, personal assistants, and other Combs business employees, facilitated these freak-offs by, among other things, booking hotel rooms for the freak-offs, stocking the hotel rooms in advance with the required freak-off supplies, including controlled substances, baby oil, lubricant, extra linens, and lighting, cleaning the hotel rooms after the freak-offs to try to mitigate any room damage, arranging for travel for victims for commercial sex workers and also for Combs to and from these freak-offs, resupplying Combs with requested supplies, delivering large sums of cash to Combs to pay the commercial sex workers, and also scheduling the delivery of the IV fluids. In or about March of 2024, during searches of Combs' residences in Miami, Florida, and Los Angeles, California, law enforcement seized various freak-off supplies, including narcotics and more than 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lubricant. I'm sorry, guys, I gotta pause. Who needs 1,000 bottles of lube? That is crazy. So then it goes on to say, Combs subjected victims to physical, emotional, and verbal abuse to cause the victims to engage in these freak-offs. Combs maintained control over his victims through, among other things, physical violence, promises of career opportunities, granting and threatening to withhold financial support, and by other coercive means, including tracking their whereabouts, dictating the victims' appearances, monitoring their medical records, controlling their housing, and also supplying them with controlled substances. During and separate from these freak-offs, Combs, among other things, hit, kicked, threw objects at, and dragged victims at times by their hair. These assaults often resulted in injuries that took days or weeks to heal. Combs also threatened victims' careers and livelihoods, including if they resisted participating in these freak-offs. Victims believed that they could not refuse Combs' demands without risking their financial or job security, or without repercussions in the form of physical or emotional abuse. Combs also used the sensitive, embarrassing, and incriminating recordings that he made during these freak-offs as collateral to ensure the continued obedience and silence of the victims. Members and associates of the Combs enterprise, including Combs' security personnel, at times carried firearms. On more than one occasion, Combs himself carried a brandished firearm to intimidate and threaten others, including victims of and witnesses to his abuse. In or about March 2024, during searches of Combs' residences in Miami, Florida, and Los Angeles, California, law enforcement seized firearms and ammunition, including 3 AR-15s with defaced serial numbers, as well as a magazine. Members and associates of the Combs enterprise enabled Combs' control over victims by following his directions regarding financial payments to victims, advancing or suppressing the victims' career opportunities, and acquiring the controlled substances that Combs used to keep these victims compliant. Members and associates of the Combs enterprise at times witnessed Combs' violence toward the victims or the victims' injuries caused by Combs without intervening. Instead, members and associates of the Combs enterprise helped conceal the violence and the abuse by, among other things, assisting Combs in monitoring and preventing victims from leaving locations, such as hotels or even Combs' residences. And these occasions included instances in which a victim was required to remain in hiding, sometimes for several days at a time, all to recover from injuries that Combs inflicted without being publicly observed. Members and associates of the Combs enterprise also assisted Combs in locating and contacting victims who attempted to flee his abuse. When employees, witnesses to his abuse, or others threatened Combs' authority or reputation, Combs and members and associates of the enterprise engaged in acts of violence, threats of financial and reputational harm, and verbal abuse. These acts of violence included kidnapping and arson. In addition, on multiple occasions, Combs threw both objects and people, as well as hit, dragged, choked, and shoved others. When Combs' authority or reputation was threatened by the possibility of negative publicity or legal or law enforcement action against him, including in or about late 2023 following public allegations of Combs' crimes, Combs and members and associates of the enterprise pressured witnesses and victims, including through attempted bribery, all to stay silent and not report what they experienced or knew to law enforcement. On phone calls, Combs and other members and associates of the enterprise, among other things, provided these victims and witnesses with a false narrative of events in an effort to conceal Combs' crimes. Combs caused these calls to be recorded on at least 2 occasions. So now we're in the racketeering conspiracy. It says from at least in or about 2008 through on or about the date of the filing of this indictment in the Southern District of New York and elsewhere, Sean Combs and others known and unknown, being persons employed by and associated with the Combs enterprise, described in paragraphs 6 through 12 of this indictment, an enterprise engaged in, and the activities of which affected interstate and foreign commerce, knowingly combined, conspired, confederated, and agreed together with each other to violate the racketeering laws of the United States. That is, to conduct and participate directly and indirectly in the conduct of the affairs of the Combs enterprise through a pattern of racketeering activity, as a term that is defined in Title 18, United States Code, Sections 19611 and 91615. This included multiple acts of kidnapping, chargeable under the following provisions, state of law, and it cites all the penal code, multiple acts of arson, again, cites all the penal code, multiple acts involving bribery, again, penal code, multiple acts indictable under Title 18, which is relating to tampering with a witness, with a victim, or an informant, multiple acts indictable under Title 18, new section relating to forced labor, multiple acts indictable under Title 18 in a new section relating to sex trafficking, multiple acts indictable under Title 18 in another section relating to transportation and inducement to travel for purposes of prostitution and other illegal sexual activities, and multiple offenses involving the possession with intent to distribute or distribution of narcotics and controlled substances, including cocaine, oxycodone, alprazolam, methylene dioxide, methamphetamine, gamma hydroxyuric acid, and ketamine. Some of those names, guys, sorry, there's like over 40 letters in some of these names. It was part of the conspiracy that Sean Combs agreed that a conspirator would commit at least 2 acts of racketeering activity in the conduct of the affairs of the Combs enterprise. So then it goes into the notice of special sentencing factors. And it says, from at least in or about 2009 up to and including in or about 2018 in the Southern District of New York and elsewhere, in his agreement to conduct and participate in the conduct of the affairs of the Combs enterprise through a pattern of racketeering activity, Sean Combs agreed to, in and affecting interstate and foreign commerce, knowingly recruit, entice, harbor, transport, provide, obtain, advertise, maintain, patronize, and solicit by any means a person, knowing and in reckless disregard of the fact that means of force, threats of force, fraud, and coercion, as described in Title 18, and any combination of such means, would be used to cause the person to engage in a commercial sex act. This is in violation of Title 18, and it cites the code. Then it goes into count 2, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion. From at least in or about 2009 up to and including in or about 2018 in the Southern District of New York, Combs the defendant, in and affecting interstate and foreign commerce, knowingly recruited, enticed, harbored, transported, provided, obtained, advertised, maintained, patronized, and solicited by any means a person, knowing and in reckless disregard of the fact that means of force, threats of force, fraud, and coercion, as described in Title 18, and any combination of such means would be used to cause the person to engage in a commercial sex act and attempted, aided, and abetted, and willfully caused the same. It goes on to say that he recruited, enticed, harbored, transported, and maintained a person, known as Victim 1, and attempted and aided and abetted and willfully caused Victim 1 to engage in commercial sex acts, knowing and in reckless disregard for the fact that Victim 1 was engaging in commercial sex acts as a result of force, fraud, and coercion. Count 3 is transportation to engage in prostitution. And this is very much the same of what I just read, so I won't cite all of the code and all of the legal jargon necessarily, but it does say that he knowingly transported an individual in interstate and foreign commerce with the intent that the individual engage in prostitution, and he attempted and aided and abetted and willfully caused the same. To wit, he transported, aided and abetted, and willfully caused the transportation of female victims and commercial sex workers in interstate and foreign commerce on multiple occasions with the intent that they engage in prostitution. So then it goes into the forfeiture allegations, where it just basically breaks down all of the different penal codes, all of the different sections, where it says that he shall forfeit to the United States pursuant of the title with the cited penal code, and it says he shall forfeit all property, real and personal, anything that was used to facilitate the commission of any of these said offenses, anything that afforded any source of influence over, just kind of anything that really helped facilitate all of these different crimes. It talks about property, it talks about personal effects, it talks about all sorts of different things, basically citing everything under the umbrella. And then it goes into the substitute assets provision, where it says, if any of the above described forfeitable property as a result of any act of omission of the defendant cannot be located upon the exercise of due diligence, has been transferred or sold to or deposited with a third person, has been placed beyond the jurisdiction of the court, has been substantially diminished in value, or has been commingled with other property which cannot be subdivided without difficulty, it is the intent of the United States, pursuant to Title 18, Code, to seek forfeiture of any other property of the defendant up to the value of the above forfeitable property. So basically what they're saying there is, if he tried to throw things offshore, or if he tried to disguise different property he owns under somebody else's name or transfer it, sell it, whatever he did, and tried to hide assets, that they're saying if they can prove that he did any of that as a result of any act of omission or anything on his part, then they're going to come after him for other stuff that he has up to the value of those things that he has now made it difficult for them to get their hands on. So I know that was a lot, and I appreciate you sticking with me, especially with some of the legal jargon. I tried to, get through it as easily as I could, but that's why I needed my water. But we are just scratching the surface. It is going to be so interesting if this goes to trial, what all goes down, what more information comes out. I feel like we probably just opened the floodgates, but the fact that he had 1,000 bottles of lube, that there's proof that all of his associates in the enterprise helped him cover all of this up, which, hello, no real surprise there, right? But this was ongoing for decades. And again, I don't think it's that big of a surprise, especially with all of the things we've heard over the years, especially if you're a millennial like me, about his involvement with Tupac, about his involvement with Jay-Z, all of these things about, not to go conspiracy, but the Illuminati and all these higher-ups. And I'm not saying this is Illuminati, but you know what I mean. I just am very surprised personally that this is happening in the sense that he is being held accountable. But I feel like that's kind of the way that we're going now. A lot of these people in power are being called out. They are being held accountable. Not all of them, but some of them, which, hey, I'll take it. That's a good start. So we'll see where this goes. We have yet to hear from Cassie. J-Lo hasn't made a statement either, and there's rumors about when she was dating him, how they showed up to some nightclub and she was forced to carry a gun for him. Again, that's just a rumor, but I don't know. I don't know where we go from here. I will definitely keep you updated. So if you're not following the podcast yet, take a quick second. It's totally free, obviously, but just go in the top corner of whatever app you're listening on and press follow, because I'm able to jump on the mic really fast and give you these updates as they're happening. So I also will update you over on Instagram, which is @_Annie Elise. Now, while I had no intention of coming back on the mic this soon and dropping an episode this Thursday, we had just moved it up, we have more to talk about because I covered the whole indictment, everything in Tuesday's episode, literally caught up in real time. But since then, more information has come out, and more information that I believe is very, very relevant to share. So let me give you a rundown of everything we're talking about in today's episode before I jump right into it. We're going to be, of course, touching just briefly on all of the new bail news because he was back with another bail hearing yesterday on Wednesday, and I'm going to go over what happened in that. But more than that, there's been evidence and testimony that narcotics had been found in his hotel room right after he was arrested in New York. His closest allies are now separating from him and quitting, turning off their cell phones. They want nothing to do with him. I'm going to go into the specifics of who and why that's such a big deal. We also are learning more about the defense team's strategy and something that I think is very interesting. There is a lot of comparison in Diddy's case with the Epstein case. I understand why, for, logical and legitimate reasons. But what nobody is really talking about is the fact that his defense lawyer is also the one who represented Keith Raniere in all of his stuff. He ended up quitting the case, I believe, but in any event, he had represented him. And if you don't know who Keith Raniere is, he's the one from NXIVM, which is a sex trafficking cult. They were located in, where were they? They were in New York. They were in Albany, New York. And he would bring in celebrities and women, and he would have sex with the women. He would make the women have sex with each other. Then the women started having a spin-off little cult within it. They had to get branded. It was a disgusting, disgusting case. They ended up doing a documentary or a docuseries on it, I think on HBO Max. I think it was Max. But anyway, it's the same defense team, which I feel like that's a little too close to comfort, right? But I guess he knows that whole world well. We also are going to talk about the Brooklyn jail that Diddy is currently being housed in. We're going to talk about the conditions, plus the fact that he allegedly is in the SHU, which the SHU is spelled SHU, not like a shoe on your foot, but it's segregation. And that's very important because it makes it very, very difficult to not only have any privileges, but also to get in contact with him, even as his defense attorney. Not that it's impossible, it just makes it difficult, and I'm going to go into all of that. And then we're also going to talk about a new witness testimony that just came out a couple of hours ago, where she talks about her night with Diddy and what went down in that. So we've got a lot to go over. Let me just kind of kick off, in case you didn't listen to Tuesday's episode, with a very high level review, which I'm sure you've seen the headlines at this point. But this investigation into Diddy has been ongoing for about a year now. Then finally, on Monday night, he was arrested at a hotel in New York City, and he was charged with 3 felonies: sex trafficking, racketeering conspiracy, and transportation to engage in prostitution. In that federal indictment that was unsealed, which we reviewed verbatim on Tuesday's episode, you can go back and listen, but I went through all 14 pages word for word so that you understood, the whole dirtiness of it all. He was described in this indictment as the boss of this years-long criminal enterprise, one that threatened and abused different women, that would coerce these women into participating against their will in these drug-fueled orgies with male prostitutes. And it said that Diddy would threaten them with violence, with the loss of financial support if they refused to partake. And apparently these orgies, which he called freak-offs, which I think is so disgusting and weird in itself, but in these orgies, they would last for days, where they'd be fed drugs. He would be masturbating in the corner. That sounds vile and graphic, but I'm telling you, that's what it says in the indictment. He would watch and masturbate in the corner. He would video record them. He would then use those recordings as leverage to try to blackmail them. And these would apparently go on so long and be so exhausting, because they would go on for so many days, that they would have to have people come with IVs to bring the energy back to them and rehydrate them, an IV that you get in a freaking hospital. I personally do get IVs anytime I'm hungover, because they do have people who come to your house and do those, but that just goes to show how intense these parties were. They also outlined in this indictment how when they executed those search warrants on his house, they found 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lube, 3 different AR-15s with the serial numbers sawed off, scraped off, which I think is very interesting, considering there has been so many different allegations over the years of his involvement with different crimes, murders, and things of that nature. And it's just horrific. Again, listen to the deep dive if you are still catching up, because it has been a busy week. The racketeering charge alone, though, carries a maximum sentence of life in prison, and a sex trafficking conviction would carry a mandatory minimum sentence of 15 years. So if convicted, he is going away for a long, long time. And a lot of people are worried, okay, even if he's not making bail, what if somebody kills him in prison? What if he kills himself? Bringing back again the Epstein comparison. And I will talk about that, because the facility that Epstein was in is actually no longer even open in New York. That's why Diddy's in this Brooklyn facility, which is horrific, but I don't want to jump ahead. So let me start with talking about what went down with the bail hearing. We know that first thing after he was arrested, he was denied bail, but then his defense team was arguing it, and they were really trying to throw whatever they possibly could to the wall to make this thing stick. I'm talking, they not only were offering $50 million, but they were saying, Diddy's going to sell his plane. There's no way he'll flee the country. He won't have the means. We're going to give you $50 million. We also will make sure he has no access to his cell phone. We will have security guards monitoring his house in Miami where he would be staying, making sure that they're monitoring who's coming, who's going, all of these things. We're going to put him in, it's going to be Fort Knox, and he's not going to have access to anything. Really trying to put together, in my opinion, a compelling package, definitely. But the judge was not having it. The judge still said no, absolutely not, and ultimately denied him bail. The judge mandated that he stay behind bars until his federal trial. So he's currently in Brooklyn, and we don't know when that federal trial is going to happen. He's going to be in there for a while. The reason for the judge doing this is because they're concerned that he, of course, not only is a flight risk, whether he has a private plane or not, he has means, he is very well connected, but there's also the risk that he could self-harm, definitely. But even more than that, it's the risk of him intimidating witnesses who they're collecting even more witnesses right now. So intimidating them to not turn against him and to not testify against him. And we know that he's being accused of that and charged with that. So it definitely doesn't seem like that would be something, a far cry from happening or something out of his wheelhouse. And also being a danger to society. We saw in that video that was released a few months ago of him and Cassie in that hotel room where he literally is dragging her and beating her. So the judge is like, I don't care what you're offering. He is a flight risk. He is a threat to society. He is a threat to all of these witnesses. No, he is staying locked up. And I was happy, of course, to hear that, but also I was kind of pleasantly surprised because so often we do see in these high-profile cases where there is special treatment, quite frankly. So I'm very happy that he is being treated like, a regular schmegular guy who committed these heinous crimes and was pulled in off the street, and that they're not fooled or blinded by the glitz and the glam or any of that. Now, one of the prosecutors, Emily Johnson, did directly put a quote out calling him a serial abuser and a serial obstructor. She said that his wealth would make it so easy for him to escape undetected. And she noted that after he was arrested, law enforcement found what they suspected to be narcotics inside his hotel room. Apparently, it was in the form of pink powder. Now, I don't know what narcotic that would be. Personally, I feel like I'm well versed in the drug world, but I've never heard about a pink powder. I know white, I know gray, I know blue. Well, blue, I guess, is from Breaking Bad, so that's not real. But you know what I mean? So if you know what that pink powder is or what it could be, please feel free to educate me. But they apparently did find these narcotics in his hotel room. So as I mentioned earlier, his defense attorney is the same defense attorney who worked with Keith Raniere. And Keith Raniere is, in my opinion, one of the most dangerous and vile human beings that has ever walked the face of the earth. I mean, he was a cult leader through and through. And I'm talking classic cult leader, the long hair, the loser outfit, the loserous face who just preys on women. And of course, some higher being or whatever tells them they need to have sex with him because probably can't get it any other way, but let's be honest, But anyway, he was so dangerous because he would recruit these women and he would recruit celebrities. She was the one from Smallville. He recruited her and some other people to where then it almost gave his cult more credibility, which he, of course, was not advertising as a cult. But they would continue to bring young girls in, and these young girls would live in the same house with them. They would all share kind of this weird compound in Albany. They would be forced to have sex with Keith, of course, classic cult leader move. They also were monitored in terms of what they ate, what their weight was, who they could speak with, what their activities were. And it was all about, the same baseline thing that I feel like every cult promises, whether it's Scientology, whether it is an FLDS cult, where it's you're going to have this spiritual awakening, you're going to have this enlightenment, you're going to be a heightened being, all of these things. And so he did this for years and years and years. And then finally he got caught. And I can't remember, I think it was Mexico he fled to with a handful of these girls who still stood by him. And then he was arrested. There's body cam footage out there that shows this arrest going down. But he ended up being held in that same facility where Diddy's being held now. And so what I think is interesting, I know that was very long-winded and I rambled for a minute, but Diddy's defense attorney is the same one who represented Keith. So Keith has been convicted. He's now in Tucson, Arizona. Throw away the key. He's locked up. But I think what's interesting is what I mean by that is that he's not unfamiliar to this type of case. He's worked in sex trafficking allegations. He's worked with high-profile people. And I think that could make it a little bit tricky, not only because he's well-versed and he knows all this, but Keith was convicted. So now I feel as though he could probably strategize a bit as to what works, what doesn't work as they get ready to, I believe, head to trial in the future, of course. So I thought that was something interesting because while there has been so much comparing Diddy and Epstein, nobody's really talking about the Keith Raniere comparison. Now, I mentioned at the top of this episode that people are beginning to break off from Diddy. They don't want to have any sort of association with him, rightfully so. And what's interesting is this morning it was announced that his PR guru, Natalie Moore, who was by his side for more than 20 years, she reportedly quit just days after he was arrested. Now, to give you some context of her, she is a very renowned Australian PR expert. She was handpicked by Diddy back in the 90s to come and join his team. And she's actually somebody who played a pretty pivotal role in transforming his image from, that notorious bad boy rapper to this polished, buttoned up white parties entrepreneur. She also, not for nothing, stood by him during those horrific accusations that came from Cassie, when Cassie filed the lawsuit against Diddy last November saying he was abusive, all of those things, before that video ever even came out. Well, his PR expert stood by him through that whole thing, which, bad on you, hello, then that video also came out, and that puts a little bit of a wrinkle in your credibility, right? Anyways, that lawsuit between Cassie and Diddy ended up being settled privately. But she has served as the head of communications for Diddy's multi-million-dollar business for years. She's assisted him with his fashion line, his fragrance collection, and she was always more than willing to refute any sex trafficking claims. But the Daily Mail is now reporting that she is just gone, a ghost. Her phone is disconnected, her email address renders no longer active, and she has just fallen off the face of the earth and disconnected with Diddy. And an insider informed the publication The Irish Star, quote, "This situation left her with no other option. Diddy was her entire world, and she will surely be deposed for this if she has not been so already." So I think it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see who else starts detaching from him, who else comes out of the woodwork with stories about him, and who detaches from him. Now, before we go into the new allegation that came out against him, I want to talk to you a little bit about that jail and the conditions. So I mentioned earlier how there was a lot of concern, of course, that if he was released or even not released, that he could either kill himself or somebody would kill him in jail, and that it would be very reminiscent of Jeffrey Epstein. But what a lot of people don't know is there's only one federal jail in New York now because the Metropolitan Correctional Center that was in Manhattan closed in 2021. They closed after that slew of problems that came to light after Jeffrey Epstein's suicide, which happened 2 years earlier. So now there's only one center, and that's the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. This is the federal lockup where Diddy is, and they have had a pretty bad rap. I'm talking horrific conditions, rampant violence, and multiple deaths. It's also been home to a number of high-profile inmates, not only Keith Raniere that I mentioned, but also R. Kelly, Ghislaine Maxwell, who was Jeffrey's right-hand lady, and some horrific people. A former warden at the facility says that it makes sense that Diddy would be in the SHU because he's a target if he's behind bars. He has that celebrity status, and the nature of the allegations against him potentially bring him that unwanted attention from other inmates. He says there are a whole lot of inmates there who would actually see killing him as a badge of honor. And because of that, it's almost like the SHU is the safest place for him. But let me talk to you about the SHU. In the SHU, his lifestyle is going to be way, 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 way different than not only the lifestyle he's used to, but the lifestyle that he would receive if he was in Gen Pop. He's going to have 1 hour of rec time per day. He's only going to have 3 showers per week. He will receive a 6 a.m. wake-up call, which when he does that and receives that, he'll have to make his bed. He will have to mop the floor. He will have to keep his cell, his little area clean. And he will receive 3 meals per day, all of which will be prepared early in the day, and it'll wait in this warming box for him, and then it'll be given to him since he's not in general population. So it's definitely not fresh, not that prison food is, but it's not even as fresh as Gen Pop food. It's kept in a warming box. So it's definitely not going to be the food that he is used to receiving and eating, and not the treatment he is used to. It's been said that his family and friends will be allowed to visit periodically. However, from what I understand, usually you don't get any visitors in the SHU unless it's your legal team, and his lawyers will have more access to him to work on his case. But the problem is, sometimes being in the SHU can make it very difficult to be in contact. And that's something that his defense team is also arguing, because in the SHU, there's limited access to phones. It's harder to set up appointments to meet face-to-face. They will have access to him, but it just makes it that much more difficult to do. It's similar to Wade Wilson, actually, the guy with all the face tattoos, because he was such a high-profile case, and there's such this media frenzy around him where jail calls are being released every few days, interviews, things like that, to where they ended up revoking all of his privileges last month. They wouldn't allow him to make any calls, receive any calls. He couldn't even speak with his team. His attorneys, I guess, were having a hard time getting in touch with him too. I was talking with somebody who's closely involved in that, and they just shut down the portal entirely because he was so high profile, and they had to put him away and segregate him from everybody. So same, but different. Now, I want to talk to you about this new allegation that has come out and this testimony of what her experience was. Helena Watts remembers being invited to get naked with Diddy when she was a 23-year-old reporter, and she describes how the night quickly turned sour. This is according to an interview with The Express in the UK. And she says, "It's nearly midnight in packed Glasgow nightclub Corinthian, and I'm hanging out with P. Diddy and his entourage. The music is pumping, drinks are being guzzled, and there are lots of beautiful women just swarming the music star. Then one of his entourage, a short bald man, invites me to join them in a hot tub nearby, in Blythe's Woods Hotel. Of course I'm flattered, and I want to go. As a 23-year-old reporter who's just landed her dream job on the Daily Star's music column, I can't believe my luck. I'd waited 10 hours to interview Diddy, who was warm and charming and even leaned in for a hug. And now he wants to party with me. So I tell the short, bald man that yes, I would like to join them. Only today, and with the rapper in prison, does now this offer have a sinister quality. The short, bald man keeps a close eye on me, and when I turn to get a drink, he says, 'Helena, where are you going? Stay here where I can see you. Now you definitely want to come to the hot tub, right?' I say, 'I'm not sure because I don't have a bikini.' To which he replies, 'No worries, girl. You can go naked.' Then P. Diddy's money girls, the women that dance with him on stage, are telling me I need to come because above all, I must get my, quote, big ass in that hot tub. Their enthusiasm is infectious, and they're women, so they'll have my back. This is going to be okay. This is going to be excellent." In a frenzied commotion, Diddy leaves the club in a limo, and I'm left alone with the short, bald man. He hails a taxi, and we get in, and then I start having second thoughts. Everything in me says no, so I tell the short, bald man that I don't want to go, and that's when the atmosphere changes. His face drops, and he starts yelling, "I can't be dealing with this shit. Fucking girls, they can't make up their mind." He gets the taxi to pull over, and I'm thrown out of the vehicle. And there, I was alone in a city that I had never been to before. I remember feeling shocked and vulnerable by his outburst and how the situation unfolded, but then hugely relieved as I had gotten myself out of a potentially dangerous situation. So, incensed by the encounter, I then wrote about it on my personal blog, which is why I can remember exactly how it played out. Now looking back, I wonder if the short bald man was procuring women for Diddy. I wonder if I could have ended up being one of those women who have accused him of abuse. If the allegations against him are proven to be true, I feel immense gratitude for my lucky escape and feel sorry for the many women who didn't get that chance. And this is just one woman's account, and I would have to imagine that we're going to see countless accounts coming forward and starting to emerge. Prosecutors have said that they have interviewed over 50 victims and witnesses, and they expect that number to grow. And that's, again, one of the reasons why the judge isn't allowing bail, because there is a history of victim intimidation, allegedly. So who's to say he's not going to try and bribe and intimidate and do all of these things? So it's like, as long as he's held away, he can't contact people, he can't do anything. Sure, he probably still has people doing his dirty work for him, but maybe with him locked away, that will start to subside as well. Just like his PR person who now has, ghosted everybody and turned off her cell phone, turned off her email. Maybe people won't feel as compelled or threatened themselves to help him. and then hopefully this case kind of gets blown wide open. I'm very confident that more charges are going to follow. I think this is just the tip of the iceberg, and it was just enough to get that arrest warrant and get him locked up to where he would be refused bail and that it would be enough to hold him. But I don't think this is all they've got, especially if they've interviewed over 50 victims and witnesses. So it's my belief we are going to see way more charges come down the pike. We also, I think, are going to hear a lot more of the unsettling details of what truly went on behind the scenes in Diddy's life. So as I mentioned on Tuesday, if you aren't following this podcast, take a second. It's obviously totally free. Hit the little button in the top corner and follow, because as soon as we get these updates, just like today, I want to jump on the mic and I'm going to give them to you. So if you don't want to miss those, make sure that you're following. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of SERIALously with me. I know we did 3 this week instead of the normal 2, but I will be back on the mic with you Monday morning for a deep dive into an all new case. So check back for that. Also, as a reminder, if you want to see one of these episodes live and in person, we are hitting the road. Come and do a city near you. The tour starts next week. You can get all of those details over on the website, Annie, Elise, and go to the events page. We're going to San Diego, Phoenix, Denver, Salt Lake City, Orange County, California. It's all over there. So tickets are almost gone, but there are some left, so grab them now. All right, guys, thanks again, and until the next one, stay safe, be nice, don't kill people, don't join any cults, and just take care of yourself.